All right. I wanted to talk a little bit about random numbers. This is what we did in class on Wednesday. Um, and random numbers are really important. We'll be using them a lot. Computer scientists use it all the time for various activities. And so here's, in case you either missed it or went too fast, whatever, here's a little video on doing all that kind of stuff. So um, couple things. So we're going to make a magic 8 ball. There's a checklist to get things started. Here is some starter code to get you going on it. It's called Rand Tester, but we'll kill two birds with one stone, or I don't know what the right metaphor is, the cliche. Uh, we'll do this all as not as tester, but rather as the magic 8 ball. So this starter code is what you're going to copy to begin with. You're going to open up your editor. Here it is, and I'm going to paste this in, and I want to now test it. So I'm going to save this as not Magic 8 Ball 2, but rather Magic 8 Ball. I already have one, so it's going to ask me if I want to replace it. I'll say yeah. So here's my Magic 8 Ball code. Let's take a look and see what that looks like. Here's a Magic 8 Ball, and well, great. There is my page, and we'll test that out at this point. And it just says hello. Always a good idea, I think, to just make sure that the call to your function, MathDotRandom, is in fact going to alert the correct thing that you intended to do. So yeah, that's all good. We have this global variable called rand in the actual Magic 8 Ball. You'll move that as a local variable, move it inside the random function. But for right now, we'll keep it as a local. I'm sorry, as a global variable. We're setting it to -1 initially. That's so that we'll know if the user has gotten a random number. So if it's -1, that's not a valid random number. We'll know that, oh, you just simply haven't clicked here yet, and we can give them maybe some starters. Uh, so what we're going to do is we're going to reassign rand here to a random number. And there's some built-in functionality that JavaScript has, which we're going to access. So that's going to be math.random is the name of this method, this function. And if I alert, instead of alerting the word hello, I'm going to alert rand. I can see what kind of a number is that? There are no parameters that come back with this particular function. So that's a little on the peculiar side. So if I save this and refresh, I'm going to get this kind of bizarre, rather lengthy random decimal. All right, and if I keep doing that again and again, that's a random decimal. That was a small one. 0.8, another 0.8, 3.8s in a row. Oh, there you go. I should be playing poker right now. And again, so it's a random number, but it's a random decimal. There's a 0.9. And just do this all day to see. And it turns out there are, I believe it's 17 places that this random decimal comes out to. Well, that's great, except that a random decimal is not particularly helpful. So what we can do is if I wanted to let's say I wanted 10 options, all right? So we'll get a random number between 0 and 9. That would mean I would take that random decimal and I'm going to multiply it. Asterisk is to multiply by 10, all right? So get that random decimal, move the decimal point over one place, and let's take a look and see what we get then. if I refresh this, now notice that, oh, we just slid that decimal over one place. I have all this extra stuff, but that's 9 point something, and here is, oops, there's 8 point something, and there's 0 point something, and another 0 point something, and a 5 point something, and you can play with random numbers. Well, that's great. That means that if I were somehow able to get rid of that decimal, I would be left with a random number between 0 as a min and 9 as a max. All right. So if I get a random decimal and I multiply it by 10, I'm shifting that decimal point over 1. The smallest value is going to be 0. The max value is going to be 9. So I would recommend that you do this. This is returns. Make it this comment, and that way you'll have it. Returns a random decimal between 0 and it's inclusive on 0. So I might get 17 zeros in a row. 0.0000, right? That is a possible solution. And 1, but it's exclusive on the top. All right, so the max value is exclusive. It will never get to 1.0. It'll get to 0.99999 for 17 places. All right, and so again, if I shift that over by 10, we're good. Okay, I'm just going to move that over, but I don't want that decimal. And one way I can do that is I can reassign rand to uh, a new number, and there's a new function. It's called MathDotFloor. And MathDotFloor truncates the decimal. It cuts it off. It actually is the way that it's actually described is it's going to return the nearest integer that is less than the parameter. So whereas math.random did not take any extra pieces of information, math.floor does it, right? So you want me to truncate something? Fantastic, I will. Oh, you got to tell me what you want me to truncate. And so that is our variable rand. Let's walk through these lines. This is going to get a random decimal between 0 and 1, exclusive on the top. I'm going to move the decimal over 1, small point over 1 place. All right, and math.floor truncates, good word to know. It's off decimal, right? So again, notice that I have to reassign math.random. A very common error for students is just to say, oh, I want to truncate it. Okay, did it, but it will truncate it, but I'm not storing that anywhere. I'm not hanging on to that piece of information. So that data just goes floating off into space. So you do want to make sure that you reassign rand to that number. And if you do that, you're going to get this. All right, so now it's 5. So now instead of having that big long decimal at the end, now I have a random number between 0, there's the min, and 9, there's the max. All right, and I can keep doing this, and I will never get a negative value, and I will never get a value that is greater than 9. All right. So that's where we'll pause it. We'll talk about how to adjust that. So 0 and 9 is very, very cool, but may not necessarily be what we want. All right. So the next step that we got going here is so we have this random number, and it is 0 through 9. Well, that's very nice, except nobody says, hey, pick a random number between 0 and 9. So if we wanted to adjust that, if we said pick a random number between 1 and 10, here I've got this guy is truncating that, my answer is going to be between 0 and 9 at this point. So if I wanted the min value to be 1 and the max value to be 10, seems pretty straightforward that all I would need to do is add 1 to rand. So get the current value of rand, add 1 to it. And now I got me a random number between 0, so between 1 and 10 instead of 0 to 9. And just to prove my point, here it is. And there's 10. Great. There's the max value. Keep doing this. There's 1. That's the min. And you'll notice that 0 is no longer showing up. Right? So I can adjust my range up and down depending on, so if I wanted it to be really small, that I will be able to do that. All right. So typically what we do is, I'm going to comment this line out for the time being, is I'm going to assign rand to math.random. So wait, you just commented it out. You'll see why in a second. So math.random. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply that by the number of options that I want. All right. And so that's what we did here. We said pick a random, and we just moved that decimal point over by moved it over by one place. All right, and that got me 10 different options. Well, the same thing is true if I were to say I want to, instead of 1 to 10, I want it to 1 to 5. All right, that's 5 different options. And so if I were to multiply that times 5, math.random might return 0.0000 times 5 is going to be 0. And math.random, if it comes back 99999, that times 5 is going to be 4 point, 5, a bunch of stuff, right? 4.5 roughly. So that means that if I floor it, the min value is going to be 0. The max value is going to be 4. That is 5 options, even though the max value is 1 less than the total number of options that I have. So the way that I actually get random numbers is I'm going to multiply math.random by the number of options. Right? That's kind of the key thing. So you got to think about how many options am I talking about? I'm going to multiply math.random times that, and now I can then adjust some things. So if I multiply it by 5 at this point, I'm going to comment that line out as well. So I'm now doing a couple of things. Previously, I just got the random decimal and I outputted that. Then I multiplied that random decimal, that variable times 10, that moved it over. Here I'm doing both of those on the same line. Get that random decimal, multiply it by the number of options. If I floor that, that means that I'm truncating the decimal. That means, again, if I multiply it by 5, the min value is going to be 0. The max value is going to be 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 options. If I add 1 to it, now I'm going to have a random number that's going to be between 1 and 5. So I'm going to save that and refresh. And now when I click, there's 4, there's 1, there's 5. And I don't get 0, and I got a random number between between 1 and 5. Again, multiply math.random times the number of options, and then adjust that any way that you need. Again, most people start with 1, not with 0. So what if I wanted to, instead of doing that with, I want to make a random number, generate a random number between, I could spell it eventually, between -10 and +10 inclusive, meaning that both -10 and +10 are legitimate options. All right. So if it came back 9999, then that's not going to be what I want to do. I want to include 10. How many options is that? That looks like 20, but I'm also including 0 in that. So I've got numbers -1 to -10. That's 10. I've got +1 to +10, that's another 10, that's 20, but I'm also including 0, so that's going to be 21 options. My code is going to be this. I'm going to have rand equals math.random, capital M, by the way. I think I might have not said that before, times 21. That's going to give me a random number between 0 and uh, 20 inclusive, right? Which is not what this is stating, but that's going to get me at least started. That's the right number of options. So if I subtract 10 from the min value, so let's say it came back 0, and I subtract 10, that's going to get me to negative 10. If it came back as the max value, came back 20, and I subtract 10, that's going to be I'm going to be left with 10. And so that's all I got to do. So I'm going to take rand, it's going to be rand minus 10. That's going to give me a random number that is going to include -10, and it's also going to include +10, and we should be good. So this line here, I'll comment that out, and then I'm going to floor it. The question, one question: do you add 1 before or after you floor? Again, because I'm truncating that decimal, I'm not doing anything with it. It doesn't matter if I floor it before I floor or after. Or I add 1 before or after I floor it. So sometimes it does matter. You do need to think about what is that result. Where is it that I, am I going to get the min value that I want and the max value that I want? So now what I've got, again, a random number, multiply it by 21. That's going to give me a range of numbers between 0 and 20, which is what I want. That is 21 options because I'm including 0. I subtract 10 from that, and that's going to shift that whole range down by 10. If I floor it and I alert, I should be able to get a random number between, there's 10, that's the max. There's 9, there's -4, so it went negative, that's good, -9. And if I keep doing it, eventually I should get -10. I'm not seeing it, but there it goes, -10. So it is working. That is the range of numbers, and I'm all good. All right. So that's how to do negative numbers, or how to do random numbers rather. How to isolate them as whole integers. If real quick, if you go to Google Classroom, there is a checklist of how to do a setup. I did a video for that as well. If you're not sure how to get textures and all that kind of stuff, I do that. So as this is loading up, um, this is what you're going to be looking at. And eventually it will load. Maybe sort of, kind of. But there's a checklist for what you need to do for that So here's how to do the starter page. This is the checklist of the things that you're going to need to have in that. And it would have been smarter for me to have opened that up prior, but come on, man. There it goes. Sorry for the delay. But you're going to want to make sure that you set your background to a texture, have a heading that's appropriate, have an image. Again, this is a soothsaying, magic 8 ball-y kind of a thing. So having a picture that seems to kind of represent that. You're going to want to have a couple of text boxes. Here's the code that would create that. You're going to want to add an ID to it, an ID for question and an ID for answer for the two text box. Have breaks in between them so that they're on their own lines. You already have a button that came with the starter code, and you are going to need to also add some text to your page that tells people what to do. All right, so we want to be able to have the user, oh, I'm supposed to type in a question. We'll look and see whether or not that's a question or not. And then, as I said earlier in the video, we want to make rand, we want to make that a local variable. So we don't need to hang on to what that random number is from one round to the next. You will need to make a global variable. That's going to be the list of your responses that you shake the magic 8 ball and it comes back with yes or no, whatever. And so you'll need to have that. And then you should be able to test by alerting each element, and just to make sure that part is working. We'll get to the actual code for that next week.